David Alexander.
Thank you very much. I don't think the clicker works because I'm obviously using cloud-based technology, so I'll probably have to go and press the button. But interestingly, the word David was used repeatedly, and you may not realise it, but we have David Alexander, Dominic Cleland, David Evans. So the interesting question about identity was which David was Kieran talking about? Answers on a postcard. So my conversation, briefing with David Evans was, could I come along and talk about what's happening out there at the moment around person-centred economies, how data is being dealt with. I've got 4 themes to talk to you about. Customer effort, we're making our customers work too hard. Person-centred thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm horrified to tell you this is not being customer-centric as an organisation. This is fundamentally different than person-centric or customer-centric, and we've got to get our head around that. And the portable digital proof. We want this economy to flow. It's fundamental that we have portable digital proof or trust, encapsulating the way that machines can process and work on our behalf and saves our lives and time. And then transparency and consent, and we'll deal with those and unpick them as we go. I shall try to keep a good pace on it. So what's the good about easy access to data? Data is good for everyone. Well, we can cure cancer, can't we? Absolutely fantastic goal. We can personalise services. We can provide an exceptional customer experience. We can increase sales if you're in a brand where it's a business-to-consumer organisation. You clearly want to be able to do that. We might want to reduce cost and risk to our organisations by greater certainty and understanding, but we've got to get hold of data. And we can deliver better public services. And nobody can miss the comprehensive spending review, the need for, I think it's something between 18 billion a year savings, so you know which way the government is going about streamlining operating costs whilst maintaining frontline services. Anyone heard that pitch inside a brand? We've got to do more for our customers, but we must do it for a third of the price, twice as fast. So the other part, of course, is that we can discover more about ourselves and have insight and have profound understanding, that climbing up the knowledge tree. So those are the good things about data, but the bad, I don't want to call it bad, but we can see it happening every day. There's daily news of data breaches. There's a terrifying FTSE report that came out saying the planning assumption for big brands and organisations is that you will be breached. So you need to insure against it. What a fantastic response. Okay, so as IT professionals sitting here, how about doing something more than just buying an insurance policy to try and protect your brand? Rising tide of concern about personal data, we see that. Regulations are outdated, the new regulations may be unimplementable, and if you're certainly a business built on the monetisation of data, you think the new regulations are evil. There's mixed metaphors about creating pain and anguish through the laborious efforts of data. Fear, uncertainty and doubt is being placed about it. And who hasn't created a customer experience where a barrier to the next step is somebody saying yes? And I sat inside a Direct Marketing Association conference where I was a keynote speaker, and I was allowed to wander around and sit in any session. And I sat at the back of a room where there was a masterclass in how to get people to say yes without realising why. And I thought that was pretty terrifying, and I know BCS wouldn't do something like that. So fixing these issues may not be welcome for people, and we are seeing the rising tide of dormant, closed ecosystems, walled gardens, where the price to pay is about losing some form of control. Now, don't believe me, just go and have a look at it. What's fantastic is Tim Cook from Apple, one of these walled gardens, is now actually pointing fingers at Google and Facebook and saying, they're bad and we're good. So you know when they start the feeding frenzy. Have you ever heard the story about the rats in a barrel? Med Confidential has been formed to try and protect all of our medical records. If you haven't opted out from care.data, you might want to consider that. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is exploding in North America. We have our own open rights group here that is fundamentally trying to make our lives easier and protect our interests. And they're currently working on something called the Snoopers Charter. Mr. Cameron would have us decrypt the internet entirely. So that's an interesting thought, isn't it? We'll make everybody safer by exposing all of our data. It's a sort of slightly insane conversation. I have been to Number 10 and had that conversation, offered them an alternative way. If we encrypted everybody who was legal, decent, honest and truthful in their daily transactions, we might remove the haystack and leave the needles for them to focus on. Now, interestingly, Deloitte did a fabulous report called Data Nation, completely free of charge, and it said which of the organisations least concerned about having access to your personal information. Now look at that, isn't it? Public healthcare, 60%. Amazing. Now look, social media organisations, 31%. Now what's interesting is that is the perception of the general public. There's another chart in there, go and download it and have a look. It's completely flipped on its head in terms of data breaches. The organisations you trust the most are the ones that lose most of your data. And that's a pretty worrying scenario and statistic. So perception versus reality. Now, trust is at an all-time low. Trustworthiness, I think, is a variable, as Kieran's talked about. So I think you can sort of say, I can trust my, pick a name of an organisation, to do what? And my point is, trust is not absolute. Trustworthiness is not absolute. There are certain things that you will trust somebody to do, but you might not trust them to do other things. So you might trust somebody to look after your child, but it's not somebody you'd ever trust with your money. And that sounds ridiculous to say, but there are certain moral levels that people go to where you would trust them to look after your kid, but you would never lend them money because you know they'd never pay it back. And that's because looking after a child is something that a covenant they would never breach. Not paying back a debt is something they'd be happy to do. So you've got to understand trust and trustworthiness is a complicated equation. But let's look. There's a lot of resources out there, and you know, I'm talking to you, I'm climbing on the shoulders of much good work, and I will come on to it. Customer effort and height, fantastic lady from Henley, talk about that. Personal data empowerment, time for a fairer data deal, extensive piece of research done by Citizens Advice, probably started when they were Consumer Futures. One of the preeminent authors of that paper is sitting in the room in the middle, Liz Cole. I will embarrass her by pointing out she's in the middle table with a pen to her cheek, and she's extremely intelligent and capable. Well done, Liz, what a fantastic piece of work. The economics of identity, fantastic paper, 3.3 billion of cost for identity. Do you know where half of that cost rests? With each of you. 1.5 billion pounds of cost of identity is put on you through effort, and we'll talk about that. The Competition Markets Authority published yesterday a research paper and consultation on the commercialisation of personal data. Now I will leave you to read the conclusions, but they are slightly scary. Analogies to slavery are not uncommon. Okay, slavery was about trading human beings for profit. We're now trading data for profit. It's a terrifying analogy, it's not hyperbole. Data Nation's there, we've produced white papers about omni-channels, attribute exchange, and the commercial use of consumer data, another research paper again. And also you've got people like GfK, big research house, talking about customer effort. So there's a vast array of resources. I'll happily provide all the links, but genuinely with this wonderful thing called Google, and yes, I do say wonderful, though I do think there's aspects of their nature that are worthy of some introspection. You can find out an awful lot of stuff entirely free for charge. So, customer effort. Ladies and gentlemen, we are making our lives miserable. We can make lives easier. Who likes filling in forms? Anyone? Hands up, please. No, if you did put your hand up, that lady there, you can do my grant applications for me, thank you. Bless you. The common sense is it dictates that we should do things faster, cheaper, better, more efficiently. Do we all agree? Can we save time? Who's sick of giving the same information out time and time again? Well, interestingly, if you need a business case for reducing customer effort, the front line of the business will tell you it's utter common sense. How many customers get frustrated about bureaucracy, jobs worth forms, ridiculous repetitive activities? The strategy in the company says we must have seamless customer engagement. We want to deliver exceptional experience. Okay, so why does it persist? We don't know. But the message you need to take away, and the numbers prove it, the customer effort quotient, measuring the amount of effort your customers have to have, is a far stronger indicator for loyalty and future lifetime value than the Net Promoter Score ever will be. And customer satisfaction surveys, which go beyond the simple question, was it easy to do business with us, frankly, are a bit of a waste of time. And there's a fantastic piece of research called The 12 Questions that you do with employees, but you can apply it to customers as well. And it's, I have the tools I need to do my job. I've made friends at work. I find it really easy. I know what's expected of me. These simple things, not 56 CSAT questionnaires. So why does it persist? Well, the status quo, amazingly, is a safety net. Now, when I was a young man in technology, there was a phrase called, nobody ever got sacked for buying IBM. It's probably still true today. But fundamentally, the status quo, that unsolvable problem, is a way of justifying the existence for many people. It's quite a sensitive area. Unsolvable problems people quite like because you can spend endless amounts of time talking about it. But actually fixing it is pretty terrifying. I was talking in the break before about a piece of, a team of people went into the tundra, the frozen tundra, and they spent 5 years searching for some mystical beast that they thought had been made extinct. They set themselves up, got grant funding, research grants, everything. They landed, expanded. 4 days into the expedition, they found the missing animal. An entire family of them, they were not extinct, job over. They were utterly suicidal over it. And there was even talk about hiding the animal for at least 9 months. But anyway, so lack of person-centered design, I will come on to that. And then what's accelerating this pressure and expectation? Well, you all are. We've got smartphones, we use collaboration tools, we're on Facebook, we interact with people, we use shared documents. We make stuff happen, and it's a hell of a lot easier to get stuff done. And then suddenly we get presented with dealing with HMRC or a big brand or somebody, and they go, in order to comply with the policy and regulation of our organisation, we're required to ask you some inane and stupid questions that we've asked you 10 times before. Please carry on. So I think fundamentally customer effort is what is killing businesses. And the research work that was done is they broke effort down into a human experience measured in cognitive effort. How much do you have to think to know what to do next? And part of that is the use of language. Time effort, how much time does it take? You know, I've got to go away and find some stuff out. I need to go and get something out of a drawer that I've never looked up. I need a reference number. I need to know what my inside leg measurement was in 1976 in order to get something done. Physical effort, how much physical energy have I got to now go to the bank with a load of documents after my online application? Got to the point where it said nearly there. Anyone done that? Yes, you're nearly there. You've now got to find a branch, but they shut all of those, didn't they? So suddenly you've got to travel to Biggleswade or somewhere like that. And the emotional effort, you know, what's the stress level? I'm worrying about it. Am I making the right choice? Do I feel informed? But we've had a regulatory change. You're not allowed to give advice anymore. You can only support self-directed guidance in financial services. So these very people at the moment of uncertainty don't know who to trust, and they're not allowed to ask for advice. And there's a load of disclaimers that you have to tick to say that whatever we say now, it's entirely your own fault if you cock it up. So it's a pretty terrifying place. So what's going on? We're killing our customers through repetition, through thoughtlessness, through illogical processes that make absolutely no sense. And the weird thing is, we all do it to ourselves. We work in companies that have relationships with people, and every time we discover something that's barking mad, why don't we change it overnight? And there's a lot of reasons that come up. I think one of the rarest commodities that's available today is common sense. I don't know how it got the name common sense, but when it's blindingly obvious, why don't you do it? Complex language. We do love TLAs, three-letter abbreviations, acronyms of all manner of complexity. And we also somehow have this disruption to daily life. Now, I'm a father of an 11-year-old. I've got a busy life. I do multiple things. And when somebody creates dissonance in my existence by telling me I've now got to find a place I've never been to in order to take a piece of paper that I could scan in an email in order to get something done, it makes no sense. You know, I bank with one of the major banks for one of my businesses. I wanted to open a bank account with that bank for another business, a community-owned village shop that banked with one bank who wanted to move there, and they said, absolutely fine, you're an existing customer, it's not a problem. Well, guess what? It is a problem because anyone else who's involved has got to physically turn up with a load of documents after we filled out all the forms online, but they can't possibly trust anyone unless they physically go. It's madness. All that stuff's available at the company's house. They have to be registered, colour of eyes, all that sort of stuff. So, blaming, and this is my big point, and I wrote a book on customer relationship management, the number one thing that happens when people complain is people justify incompetence, bad effort, overwork on regulation, organisational policy, security measures to keep you safe that drive you insane. Safety. Your safety is our paramount concern. Your stress, however, is not. Cost. You know, it's too expensive to do it right. Technology's at fault. Now, we all know that technology is as dumb as it comes unless you give it instructions. So I think it's pretty cruel to blame a piece of software, I blame the guy who wrote the code, and I do that on a regular basis. I've got developers, and I go, why did we do that? They will not get through testing. And we blame management. Have you ever seen that? Well, it's my manager. Or we blame anybody else. And it's that sense of disempowerment as an individual that really causes the problem. So the future, I would say, is already here. There are organisations out there today, any one of you could pick an organisation that does it better than the company you work for. You might think it's your company, and you'd be amazed. I've been in a room where two people cited the other company as doing it better than them. So perception is reality. Well, they're much better than we are. And when the survey came back and it was anonymised, they both cited each other as doing it better than themselves. So you've got to search for the benefits. So I would put to you that this is not so much about technology, but this is about cultural change. Okay? Change takes time. You have to want it. Changing the culture, the way we think, the way we act. And it's very challenging. I think you're going to ask for a pledge later. Don't want to set anyone up about pledging to change. This does not happen overnight, ladies and gentlemen, but you have to have a sense of style about the future that you want, and you can ride any wave of fashion. So person-centred thinking, my big point, I'm keeping my pace up here, is simply not the same as customer centred. I'm not going into any detail, but the work we're doing is looking at these touch points, this independent experience layer that's got nothing to do with your organisation. People want to be able to get something done. They don't really care which organisation they're dealing with. They've got a process they want to complete. We're seeing an explosion in apps that make your life easier, explosion in front-end services that make your life easier. Equally, person-centred identity, where I turn up and use my identity to get things done and proving who I am, is a fundamental part of it. I'm 55, I've got 725 usernames and passwords. Before I die, I will sort it out so that I'm just me, and that where I go, they accept my credential and give me access to the things I'm entitled to. If I can do that for humanity, I will die a happy man. It will be important. We already accept the existence of an independent communications layer, don't we? It was called the internet. We like encryption over the top of it to keep us safe. Those would have you put a wall around the internet. But we've now got to equip individuals with person-centred utilities that let them manage the data about their lives. And they've got data in 4 broad categories, and I'm sure we could have an intellectual debate about it. What I would call service-derived data, the stuff they get from interacting with brands and organisations, blood test results, bank statements, itemised call history, whatever it is, service interactions. App data, you know, you might think that, well, isn't that the same? Well, there's a lot of data being generated inside apps, which is largely behavioural insight data, which is part of the economy of apps that needs to be. And this man over here wrote some quite interesting work on apps that he will share with you. Mr. Mark Say, by the way, reputed journalist. In the middle, we've got personally held data, that magic stuff. The stuff that only you know, what you want to do, what you care about, what you dream about, what you might or might not do. And then you've got this other area here that we're calling traded data. The data that people are using about you in order to generate an income for themselves. So I would say a person-centred system is an individual equipped with a set of tools that allows them to interact with the world. Now, Kieran talked about trustworthiness and trust. And I think part of the challenge we've got is to move trust from the physical, from the subjective to the digital. Digital transactions will only work at wire speed, will only be seamless if we can trust the data. That's a really hard thing, people say, to do. Well, I don't think it is. Portable digital proof is verified data. Cryptography is involved. You might hear Jonathan here, who's renamed himself David just for consistency for the evening. He might talk to you about blockchain. I will talk to you about PK, various forms of cryptography. But what we're actually doing is saying that if it's verified, you get a transparent chain of trust about that data. You know where it came from. It can be about anything. It can, you know, it will be delivered seamlessly, so it happens in background, so you haven't got to fill out a form. It can be effortlessly maintained. You know, I happen to change my mobile phone number for some bizarre reason I can't quite fathom. Usually it's my in-laws who do that every time they get a new contract, because nobody explained to them they could keep their own number. We did explain, but they don't know. And suddenly, I need to tell everybody I've got a new number, or I've changed my email address, or whatever it is. Imagine that happening automatically in a trusted way. And that can be done at will. The individual can share it at will. And this is really important, that an individual can share this information themselves. They don't have to go to somebody else to make it happen for them. So the use cases for verified data, data that anyone can trust, comes down to two things, I guess: identity and entitlement. And to keep it as simple as that, identity, proving who you are in the real world, online, and in the context of a transaction. And that context of a transaction could be as simple as, give me access to this site because I'm over 18. I don't have to tell you who I am. I don't have to give you an email address or a phone number or a device ID or an IMI number. I just have to give you a token that says I'm over 18. And I'm working with the Digital Policy Alliance on age verification around what would be called adult-based products. So you can buy knives, tobaccos, and these bloody e-cigarettes that everyone seems to be drug delivery system or whatever they want to call it these days. But you know, at the end of the day, it's about being able to get something done. I'm entitled to drive a car. Did anyone see that news article, DVLA's new system? Suddenly people couldn't hire cars because DVLA couldn't serve up proof that it had a driving licence. Counterpart was removed, getting CRB is a nightmare. The entitlement part of this, right to apply for something. I was at a workshop with the Department of Communities and Local Government looking at how people apply for a thing called a deferred payment agreement. Old people living in home need to pay for their adult social care, can use their home as security, the local authority will pay for it, and they will then end up settling at a point of sale of the house. That needs proof about owning the house, about living alone. Right to access or receive a service. You know, we're working now with DWP to get a token to prove you're on qualifying benefits. Private sector love that. Energy companies have to provide a home warming kit and discounted energy tariffs, but they need to know that somebody's on a qualifying benefit. It's making these things possible and cheap and easy to do without filling forms in. And I think the other part we're all seeing all the time is right to instruct, right to discuss different aspects of people's lives. You know, I'm sick to death of American Express. I hope you're not in the room. You know, my wife manages all of our accounts, and the woman from American Express regularly says that I need to give consent for my wife to discuss our account. I'm up to the 11th time. I've got a time and date of every time I've done it. I've filled out the form 5 times, but they still persistently do it. Why can't I give proof that I trust my wife to talk about my account? Kieran, help me. Benefits are varied. You know, you want the business case, reduce time and effort, reduce risk and liability, increase productivity and convenience. Aren't these the music to your ears when trying to justify investments in infrastructure, IT, redesign, user experience? These are the things everybody wants. So we've got 2 models going on. One of them is this model where businesses share information about you with other businesses without you really knowing, beyond ticking a box. Or we're talking about this person-centered approach, a halo of trust, where you get the data once and you share it many times to different people. We believe that's faster, cheaper, and more efficient. And we know that organisations have verified attributes that they want to give to an individual. We know there are organisations who want those same attributes. Amazingly, you can sit on both sides of the table. Making verified data flow is the heart of it. And that really is about trust. Again, how do you trust that data? Kieran talked about trustworthiness and trust. You need to know who produced the data. You need to know how they produced it. You need an ability to check it was not modified in transit or storage. And you need the ability to determine if it's still valid. If you can't do that, it's very hard to trust the data. Filling out a form online doesn't make it verified. And on my last point, I've had David's thing, transparency and consent. This is one of those areas where they say it's the core challenge, it's unsolvable as an issue. Well, interestingly, the truth about trust and relationship, again, compared to organisations and the national average, people are more confident in dealing with brands that communicate transparently how they use their data. Telling people what's going on, time for a new deal, telling them what's actually happening will improve trust. Compliance and risk reduction simply aren't the business case. And again, you will look at understanding the root cause of distrust. It's pretty worrying when people strongly oppose sharing personal financial details when that's something that will give you access to new services. So why don't people trust is a fundamental issue. And I think the issue is we're currently operating what's called an organisation-centric consent model. Every time you go somewhere, you have to agree to a set of terms and conditions. Conditions you never read. How many people read the terms and conditions when they sign up to a website, make an application for a service? Okay, I'm a geek, I'm a bit of a nerd. I read a lot of them, I don't read them all. I use many, as Lord Errol said only this week, I always lie about my age. Unfortunately, the computers are getting clever, and they think if I was born in 1900, I'm reasonably speaking dead. So they're now rejecting his birth date as 1900. So I think at the heart of this, we have a tsunami coming with new regulations, we have a rising tide of concern, and it's an unworkable situation, it's unscalable for organisations, it's impractical for human beings. So there are things that we mustn't convince ourselves about. This is what I hear all the time. People don't care about consent, so they don't care about it. People are not competent to make informed decisions. People can't be trusted. You know, God, if we ask them to approve it properly, then they'd say no. And people won't give consent. No one knows what we do, so what does it matter? Well, I think there's two ways. The notion that you've got to ask for every single data attribute every single time is simply impractical. So there is this school of thought, like the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, that if you join a service where the organisation says, these are the limits of what I will do with your data, and if I move outside of that, I am in contractual breach. And there are general purpose set of terms and conditions, data sharing agreement, information sharing agreement, and the exceptions are what people have to deal with. This makes the information flow, it allows people to accumulate it and redistribute it. It's quite a hard thing. This was Adobe's digital government team trying to envisage how this might work. We've been doing some work with them around a product called Adobe Experience Manager that deals with a lot of front-end stuff. But you know, person-centered can get really granular. It's about who, what, why, when, where, and how. It is a solvable problem, so please, data is good for everyone, but we need the appropriate consents and controls around there.